The new year has already started well. One or the other may have started the new year with good resolutions. The new year has continued as the old year ended. Hello, my friends. But of course, the new year is not a person, but a cut in time about which we don't know exactly what it is all about. But maybe I make someday a separate video about time. No, human hasn't changed. Of course not. In Berlin, young people have hindered firefighting operations by attacking the firefighters with firecrackers and rockets and preventing them from doing their job. That is, preventing them from extinguishing burning buildings and saving lives. The police were also attacked. What is particularly politically charged is that these young people have a migration background. Many of them have been living in Germany for years and were even born here, but have never really integrated. It's politically charged because many simple minds are now demanding foreigners out and deportation. But things are not that simple. Attacks on firefighters, ambulances and paramedics and the police have increased nationwide. How can that be? People who help other people are attacked. Police officers who see to it that people are protected from violence, drug trafficking and crime are held an alarm pistol to their foreheads. Insults to the police are now part of everyday life in Dresden, and graffiti such as ACAB, I'll save myself the translation here, is sprayed on in many places. During my teenage years, a term circulated to identify my generation, the Null Bock generation or No Future generation. Are we dealing with a similar phenomenon today, the frustrated generation? But that's all too short-sighted. It's not about foreigners, it's not about young people. It's about all of us. It's about people who are frustrated because not only our society, but the whole world is undergoing a rapid change. The change in the reality of our lives over the last 30 years due to the internet and the digital revolution has taken place at a breathtaking pace that many simply can no longer keep up with. Like a tsunami, the tide of information tumbles over us, washing away the very foundations of who we are and what we believe to be certain. It's like living in a form of government that we are used to and that suddenly doesn't exist anymore. Yes, the digital revolution is very similar to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and German reunification. People in transition. People who don't keep up with change so quickly and run after the seductive Pied Pipers from AfD and Pegida because they make the world easy and familiar again. How many have I talked to in the last almost 20 years that I have been living as a Wessie in East Germany, first in Saxony-Anhalt, then in Dresden, who look back with nostalgia for the good old days of their childhood and youth in the GDR. It wasn't all bad. Of course not. Frustrated people. Change of scenery. 3 years ago, Corona broke out. State regulations, lockdowns and banning of gatherings at the beginning of Corona and mask regulations that helped us to overcome Corona. You forget that so quickly. But the state restrictions bring protests from all camps, whether right or left, on the scene. The lateral thinker, Querdenker scene is born. I remember television pictures of lateral thinkers protests in which right-wing extremists with a Reich flag demonstrate together with left-wing opponents of nuclear power without masks against the state's corona restrictions. We've all seen that. Frustrated citizens. How times change. Since the start of the Ukraine war, Greens, ! Like Anton Hofreiter, Robert Habeck and Annalena Baerbock have been demanding arms deliveries from the federal government, including heavy weapons to Ukraine against the aggressor Russia. You are left speechless and shake your head in disbelief when you hear how a green fundamentalist like Anton Hofreiter knows in talk shows all about the different weapon systems, like when boys compare their cards in a car quartet. The entire peace movement, including the Easter marches, was thrown overboard by a single day, February 24, 2022, the start of the war in Ukraine. A whole concept of life, no, a whole life, put in question by Putin's attack. At the green table, one can easily talk about creating peace without weapons. But when it gets serious, the Bundeswehr has been broken by underfinancing and being socially discriminated. If we were a direct neighbor of Russia and didn't have NATO and the United States of America on our side, we wouldn't even be able to last a winter with our equipment because we don't have the right clothes. Not to mention the guns. Short summary. Old and young, right and left, people with and people without German ancestors, people from East and West are frustrated by the rapid change that the whole world is subject to. Digitalization, German reunification, the corona pandemic and the Ukraine war have shaken people up and frustrated them in recent years. In addition, there is climate change and the impending collapse of the social systems in Germany. Can people at least find support in their Christian churches? Unfortunately not. All the filth of the past few years, from child abuse and corruption in recent years, here in Germany, Europe and worldwide, is now, fortunately one has to say, coming to the surface. And what about our government? I almost want to ask back, which government? I personally experience it as a great deal of uncertainty to have a chancellor like Olaf Scholz, who is not a leader. It may sound naive, but with Angela Merkel I always had the feeling of security and orientation. With Olaf Scholz I have more of a feeling of disorientation and shame. He acts in slow motion and indecisively. Be it supporting Ukraine, be it cracking down on incompetent politicians in this cabinet like Christine Lambrecht, our defense minister. So in Germany, frustration all along the line. In the movie Leon the Professional, Matilda asks with a bleeding nose, is life always this hard? Or just when you are a kid? Always like this. Leon replies, life is such that a lot happens that doesn't suit us. There are things that we cannot change and that we have to accept because we have no other choice. This also means that we are getting older and the world around us is changing faster than we would like. What feelings does that trigger in you? Fury, anger, sadness? It is childish and immature to project feelings outwardly onto others because we cannot deal with them ourselves inside. How much Pegida anger at the Federal Republic of Germany is a delayed reflex to the pent-up and suppressed feelings about the dictatorship of the GDR. People who were not allowed to express themselves because free opinion was censored and the press was muzzled and not allowed to honestly say what was true. So to speak, lying press. One comes along today and describes reporters and media as a lying press. The corona mask, which has been proven to save lives, is described as a muscle. Back then one had to keep their mouth shut, which they now open all the more for the smallest occasion that comes up. Yes, you are allowed to. You live in a democracy now. But do you see why you are so angry? This is all aggression from the past. That is no longer appropriate now and that is damaging to yourself. Germany, with all its quirks and social injustices, its growing poverty and the ever-increasing difference between rich and poor, is one of the largest industrialized countries and has put up with a bank crash in 2008, the great wave of refugees in 2016, the corona crisis 2020 to 2022, and will also manage to get over the Ukraine war. That is my firm belief. It's just that our focus on things needs to be readjusted. The prosperous generations after the war and the economic miracle Wirtschaftswunder no longer know how to deal with crisis and how well we are actually doing. The generations of our grandparents and parents who fought through the war were made of a sterner stuff. I remember stories from my parents about how happy people were then about an orange for Christmas. With all the overconsumption that we have been exposed to since the salvation of the economic miracle Wirtschaftswunder, we have completely forgotten how to be grateful. Maybe now is the time to learn how to do with less. That the high goals that advertising has implanted in our heads have nothing to do with whether we lead a happy and fulfilling life. It has nothing to do with how we feel about ourselves. Who you are has nothing to do with what you possess. Erich Fromm knew that in his book To Have or To Be. But Buddha and Jesus also knew it. And everyone who has learned to live with external poverty knows that too. In the heart of poverty dwells a silence that has become desireless. It is a space where you can meet God.